I'm Jordan Bass from Hopwtr, and you're listening to the CPG Guys podcast.
Welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. Your hosts, Shri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in an increasingly digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys. I'm of course Sri, your co-host and also CRO and co-founder at Think Blue Consulting, your trusted partner in your omni-channel development journey. Get in touch with me there at Sri at thinkblueconsulting.co, not com.co. Please do listen to my older daughter's music at www.riyaraj.com. Follow Laura Raj, my younger daughter, is a member of the world's fastest growing global girls group, Cat's Eye. Recently performed and set a record at Lollapalooza. 85,000 attendance for a daytime performance on the main stage. I'm, of course, joined today by my co-host, PVSB, Peter V.S. Bond, who also moonlights as head of industry and client engagement at Flywheel, the commerce acceleration division of none other than Omnicom. Peter, how you doing, man?
So, father of pop stars, tell me about your growing TikTok influencing persona. Now, you think blue, you are CPG Guys, you're Papa Raj, but now you're TikTok influencer. What's going on here, brother?
I just refreshed my Instagram. It was 30K overnight followers, 31.2. And then I'll go to TikTok in 1 second over here. Last night, it was 36, 38.2. So I'm overwhelmed, but it's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying this. I actually know how to edit a video end to end on TikTok and make it less than 10 seconds. Skill set I didn't have 2 months ago.
I told you need to learn how to tilt your head back and forth like a Luddite boomer. You know what I'm talking about, Sri.
You need to evolve, Peter, into the generation now. I call it generation now. It's
Generation now.
No, it's not X, Y, Z. It's generation now. Get with the program, man. The big question we're going to ask Jordan later today is, should the CPG Guys be active on TikTok? But before we do that, make sure you're subscribing to our podcast on your preferred listening platform where you can get our latest episodes. Go back to consume some of the 500 plus episodes we've already published. Today, we're pleased to have with us a guest whom I've been discussing being on the show for over a year. So we're going to get to it as soon as possible. So join us in welcoming Jordan Bass, co-founder and CEO of Hopwtr, the hop-infused non-alcoholic sparkling beverage that's making serious waves. Get it, Peter? Hop making waves in the functional beverage space. Jordan's background spans finance, brand building, and strategic ops. And with Hopwtr, he's tapped into a white-hot consumer insight. People want to cut back, not miss out. No booze, no sugar, no regrets. Bold flavor, functional ingredients, satisfying taste of hops. He's building a brand that sits right at the intersection of wellness, moderation, social connection. And from TTC to retail, Hopwtr is indeed showing up strong in the marketplace. Jordan, welcome to the show. How you doing, man?
I'm excited to be here with you two legends, and let me start by cracking a Hopwtr here.
I love that hat, by the way.
Thank you.
For those of you, hopefully we'll get your head on one of the clips on social media. We're excited to have you. Needless to say, Jordan will include in the digital show notes of this episode links to your LinkedIn profile and, of course, the Hopwtr. So I'm going to kick it off. And obviously, the first question that the audience wants to ask you, not just me, Hopwtr. What's the aha moment that sparked the idea? Why the name? You left a career in finance and business to launch a beverage startup, arguably one of the hardest spaces, TST controlled and owned by mega brands, Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, and all the several beverage brands under them and their bottling systems. What's the courage here? How do you take that leap?
For sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, from an entrepreneur standpoint, I've always admired entrepreneurs. You talked about it being a hard category. And I think like starting a brand and certainly starting a beverage brand is just like one of the hardest things that you can do in business. And I always like testing myself. I'm a endurance athlete, like to kind of push the limits. And so that was kind of always appealing. But my aha moment for the business, I'd like to say my co-founder and I were kind of on independent paths to the same conclusion. We both have always been healthy, outdoor lifestyle guys, love drinking beer. I grew up in a small town in Northern California and kind of the heart of the craft beer revolution. I recently saw a New Yorker cartoon that said craft beer isn't a hobby, and I felt like that was intended for me. And so, love drinking craft beer, love doing outdoor stuff. And I found that as I got older and busier, that there was just a bunch of occasions where I wanted that moment of cracking a cold one, but didn't want the alcohol, calories, carbs, etc. And Nick, my co-founder, is former Marine, competitive athlete. He would say the same thing. And, we kind of found that we were drinking a bunch of berry flavored LaCroix, and that wasn't that satisfactory after having a couple at the office, or we're turning to non-alc beers. They were still high in calories and carbs, didn't quite hit the spot. And so when we didn't see something in the market that kind of fit that need, we said, let's go build it ourselves. And part of my aha moment was that my wife had actually gotten pregnant with our first. And I found that I was drinking a bunch of double IPAs on the couch at night, and that didn't really align with my fitness routine. I was training for a triathlon at the time. And I said, okay, there's got to be something better out there. So we started tinkering in our backyard, and eventually came up with what became Hopwtr. And we were fortunate that when we launched it, there was a bunch of other people that loved the product too.
Hey, Jordan, welcome to the podcast. We're really glad to have you here today. You're down in LA, I know, but you said you're from Northern California. I'm a little suspect. You're probably one of those horrible Giants fans. I'm a Dodger fan, so we're gonna walk away from baseball for right now. Let's talk about Hopwtr's actual product. I'd love to understand as you went about creating it, because you mentioned that effort in your last response. How did you think about balancing the functionality you were looking for, adaptogens, nootropics, with taste and consumer satisfaction? Because it's one thing to have something functional, but if they don't like the way it tastes, you're kind of dead in the water. So tell us how you balance those two seemingly competing challenges.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. I think in CPG, if your product doesn't taste good, you're done for. There's a few small niche areas that are super functional where you can get away with not having a good tasting product, but first and foremost, product has to taste great. So you're right, that was the primary filter. And I think when we look at what our consumers are looking at, it's certainly taste first, function second. However, what we saw in the market and what we looked at for our own personal need was when you have that moment of kind of like cracking a cold one, part of that is that downshift moment from work to play, or from your work to the weekend, whatever it is, and having some functional like having a beer is functional to some degree. And so replicating that in our product, we felt was an important aspect. Two, when we did kind of our desktop research, we found that 82% of consumers are looking for functional in their everyday beverage. And I think if you step back, it just makes sense with consumer trends. Like, everyone's busier, everyone's lives are impacted. And I think consumers are looking to get more out of everything, out of every product that they're consuming. And so with that, both taste and functional benefit, we are able to deliver more value to the consumer. So that's one. And then two, to your point, just during the kind of formulation process, we were very careful to make sure that functional didn't impact the taste negatively. And I think, with our product, the hops, the flavors still come through. You still get that piney, citrusy aspect of the hops that are kind of the most prominent in the beverage.
So Jordan, flavor development, right? Take us through the portfolio. What kind of flavors do you have? How did you actually develop them? And then the flavors that you currently have in the marketplace, what's the early consumer feedback, retail feedback? Because you're not just non-alcoholic, you're functional, and that dual positioning, how's that working out for you?
For sure, yeah. Well, so when we launched the brand, we launched with three original flavors. One that I'm drinking now, which is our blood orange, mango, and our classic flavor. And funny enough, blood orange is actually still our number one seller today. We've expanded the portfolio from there. We have, 8-10 flavors now, including ruby red, grapefruit, lemonade, black cherry, lime, and several others. When we first kind of developed the product, we utilized we have kind of a proprietary digital testing method that we utilize. And so we actually will do, like any good CPG company, we'll do desktop research. We'll see what flavors are trending in the industry. But then we utilize social, as you kind of talked about earlier, and we'll actually test the flavors with our consumers before we ever even launch it. So we not only see what consumers say they like in surveys, but we'll see what they engage with and what they're willing to interact with. And it gives us another level of conviction before we ever launch the flavor. And then what we'll do now that we're in both e-commerce and retail is we'll launch our products in e-commerce. We'll see, will the consumer actually purchase the product, and what do the kind of metrics look like? And then we'll take the best winners to retail. It both gives us the conviction that we've got a winner that consumers will actually buy, but it also gives us the initial data for the retailer to say, hey, among our other flavors, this ranks X, Y, and Z. And so that gives some nice conviction to the retailer. I'll tell you a funny story when we first launched and formulated the beverage. So when we launched the product in late 2020, and when we were formulating, it was kind of right when COVID had hit, right when the pandemic had hit. We started formulating prior to the pandemic, all normal kind of process. And then COVID hit, and we were kind of like on our last round. We'd already been through several rounds. We were right there about to finish it. And our partner was kind of like, we don't know what to do, like halt on everything. We're like, no way, we have to continue. We got to finish this up. So anyway, we convinced them to finalize the formulation. We go up and meet them, and they come out literally in like hazmat suits with the products on a tray. And we're in the back of our car with the trunk flipped up. We taste it. We're like, look at each other like, this is it. High five. We got it. And that was how we locked in our final formulation.
All right. So much to unpack there. That's a great story, George.
I got a follow up for him, right? And that is going back to the retail world. How do you actually solicit feedback from retail? Are you talking to merchants, consumers, live?
Yeah, in terms of flavor development. Yeah, so certainly, yeah, we'll share samples with our retailers early on. We also have a great network of distributors and, some trusted distributors we've worked with for a long time. And so we'll get new products in their hands. I mean, those distributors have such great insights into the market. They've seen so many brands and what works and what doesn't work. And so, yeah, we try to bring as many people into the formulation process as possible. We also have a group of kind of loyalists that we've developed as a tasting panel. And so we'll actually solicit both flavor input from our consumers, from our kind of loyalists. We'll go say, hey, what flavors would you like to see next? But then we'll also include them in early tasting panels and send them raw samples and get their feedback.
Jordan, one of my favorite books that I think entrepreneurs probably are generally familiar with is Jeffrey Moore's Crossing the Chasm. And it's about startups and what it takes to get the end of that hockey stick and start shooting up. You started D2C. When you start D2C in beverage, you're up against one of the biggest costs, which is the freight cost, because you're shipping a beverage. It is heavy by nature, right? And then you moved into retail. I'd like to understand from the distribution standpoint how you manage that your shift successfully. And I'd love to know about what your first big retail win was and how that taught you about actually crossing that chasm and scaling this business.
For sure. Yeah. I think first of all, e-com is, I think, complementary to retail for us, and they're totally two different structures to run, as you talked about. So the point we launched in e-commerce, that allowed us to like quickly get product to the consumer, quickly get feedback. You referenced that book. I think another book that I like for startups is The Lean Startup. And in that, they talk about just like rapidly iterating launch, before you think you're totally ready, get feedback from your consumers. And e-commerce allows us to do that quickly. And in the early days, that was really helpful. I think now it's a way for us to, one, interact with our most loyal consumers, but two, it's also a way to drive trial for consumers and get product into consumers' hands. And then as they repeat further and they see products on the shelf at the retail, they shift into a retail customer. As far as our first big win, so we launched e-commerce. We knew obviously we were a beverage brand we're going to build into retail. So we quickly moved into retail. Erewhon was our first retailer, as you might suspect, in Southern California. So we moved into the natural channel. They were a great proof point. We continued to build in the natural channel. And then we kind of started to look at kind of crossover retailers and then conventional. So Wegmans out on the East Coast was probably our first like kind of crossover retailer, great retail partner today. And then HEB was really our first big win in conventional grocery. again, an amazing retailer and great partner today, and we've been able to learn a lot with them. I like to say to my team, and one of my favorite quotes is that because you can have this vision of a great product, that consumer is going to like, but if you can't execute and get that product to your distributor, to your retailer, get all of the right pieces in place, like you're dead in the water. And I think to your question about e-commerce versus retail, that was probably what taught me or was the biggest lesson is just in retail, execution is so critical. In e-commerce, you're more focused on the marketing side and the digital ads, right? Like the fulfillment part is not that hard to do. In e-commerce or in retail, that route to market, that aspect of getting on shelf, staying on shelf takes a lot more effort and is super important to the brand success.
I want to get back to discuss the difference. You said two different structures to run online and digital and then retail. We, of course, Peter and I are practitioners, 3 decades, some of the largest brands in the world we've touched, from PepsiCo, J&J, whatnot, CVS, Dunnhumby, you name it, right? Tell us why the difference, how do you operate them, and what's the different thinking? You've been there, you yourself are very omni-channel in nature. So how do you keep those things functioning independently, or do you bring them together at some point?
Yeah. In certain areas, I'd say that we have our teams or our work streams are a little bit more separate and some of them are more integrated. From a company standpoint, myself and our executive team are always thinking about how both channels are complementary to our overall business. So as I talked about, I think e-commerce, we do a lot of digital ads with e-commerce that creates brand awareness and drives trial, which complements our retail business. So that's a really important area that they cross over. From a logistics standpoint, when we first launched, we actually used to have 2 totally separate logistics networks. We had different warehouses for e-commerce and for retail. Over time, we were able to bring those together and fully integrate those so that we have the same warehouses serving our retail business and our e-commerce business. So I'd say over time, the organizations have melded more, and we've been able to bring them together. And and part of that is just training. Like I knew both kind of sides, but not everybody understood the way that retail and e-commerce function. And so we'd have a great retail leader and we needed to train them up on e-commerce, or vice versa, and great e-commerce leader and needed to train them up on retail. So it's been a little bit of the evolution of the organization.
It's the dilemma of the large brands, right? To figure out how to do that and bring it together. So what about online visibility and conversion? Do you see a difference in each of the channels? One easier, one harder? Does one feed the other?
I think that, and maybe just backing up, I also was fortunate to work for a large CPG company where I was able to see the way that a good e-commerce and built the way that the e-commerce business operated. So I had kind of that experience and was able to leverage that for our business today. I think in terms of conversion and the way that the different channels operate, from a marketing standpoint, they operate quite differently. As you guys know, in the retail game, you have a couple seconds at the shelf to message to your consumer and to win your consumer. And you don't have the ability to have 10 different messages at the retail shelf. Like you have to have a focused message. So a couple of years ago, we changed our tagline to positively refreshing, which encapsulates both the refreshing nature of the product, that kind of moment to cracking a cold one, but also the functional benefits. On the online space, we can have 20 different messages tailored to our specific consumer group. And we do, they're not like completely different, but we're able to hone the messaging a little bit more specifically for that specific customer demographic. So I think the 2 channels from a marketing standpoint do operate actually quite differently.
And all the process and bureaucracy of the large companies, are you just happy that you don't have to deal with it again? Or have you found that as you scale, you've had to bring a bunch of process in?
We've tried to certainly as we've scaled, we've had to bring process to operate more efficiently. We've tried to bring process in the areas that it's helpful. So in logistics and manufacturing and quality control and those types of things, process is incredibly important. You need to get that right every single time. in marketing, we try to be a little bit more open to new ideas and innovation and try not to be so rigid. To your point, I think in the larger companies, you get maybe a retail message that works super well, and then you try to translate that to the digital world, whether it's e-commerce or digital in general. And you need to be a little bit more experimental. You need to be open to whatever the trend is, or speaking in kind of a more digitally native language. And so, we try to be more creative in kind of digital and e-commerce.
Awesome. Let me remind our audience that today we're speaking with Jordan Bass, CEO of Hopwtr.
So Jordan, if you need to do things that are a little more edgy from a digital perspective, I know a father of pop stars that isn't but a growing TikTok influencer that you could probably bring on board as a brand ambassador. I'm just saying.
I love an intro as well, Peter. CPG Guys can use it.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Good idea.
Could you ask that person to wear CPG Guys gear, perhaps?
Exactly. By the way, Jordan, you will be getting a CPG Guys t-shirt.
Nice.
After the event. And the big aspiration is for those that come on the show 5 times, kind of like Saturday Night Live, they get a CPG Guys varsity jacket, wool and leather. It's very nice. It's high end. So you got 4.
Nice. Well, I'll have to return the favor and get you guys one of these hats.
We love that. We love that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about brand building. What have you found so far has been particularly effective at building brand awareness in a highly competitive category? You've leaned into wellness and lifestyle messaging. How do you ensure, as you're building brand awareness, that the authenticity in your branding is not only prevalent, but is well recognized by the audience as you are creating this?
For sure. Yeah. There's a couple items in there. One is kind of like the maybe tactics of brand building and awareness, and then is kind of the messaging. I think we talked about big CPG. When you're a big CPG company, you can go buy a $20 or $50 million TV campaign, and you can blanket with awareness that way. When you're an emerging brand, obviously you don't have the budget to do that, so you have to find other ways. And digital for sure is the best way to do that, and I think it's how most young emerging brands are built. So we lean on digital really heavily to build our brand awareness. And then I think the other thing that you talked about authenticity and how we've kind of built. I think as an emerging brand, one of the things that you need to do early on is identify who your loyalists are and who your community is. And then because you don't have that $50 million campaign or TV campaign to blanket everyone in America, you want to gain high awareness with that consumer that is likely to purchase your product. And that's really what we did. We identified who our core consumer group was or consumer groups were, and then went hard at the events, the digital things that those people were seeing. And so things like events where they're at, whether that's yoga events or whether that's beer festivals, whatever it is for our, specific wellness consumer. And then getting cans in hands is such a critical and, maybe overlooked area in beverage. Like just getting the liquid to lips is one of the most important things I think that you can do in beverage. So we spent a lot of time and effort doing that. I was just actually at the All-Star game in Atlanta, and we probably handed out, 5,000 cans to consumers. And the amount of consumers that introduces to the brand is incredibly valuable.
Peter, what is an all-star game? What is he referring to?
I have no idea. Do they look up at the sky at night with a telescope? Is that where they see all the stars?
Exactly.
They're looking for the SpaceX satellites.
We're gonna have to look into that, Shri.
I want to go back to your piece on authenticity too. You asked about how do we stay authentic. I think for us, in the beginning, I maybe referenced that we built this brand for ourselves. So I think authenticity is just kind of built into our DNA. We're fortunate that we're building the product for ourselves, for our families, for our friends. And we live in Southern California, and the brand is kind of built on a Southern California lifestyle. So it's really what are we doing? What are we seeing? What are we living? And so I think, again, authenticity is just built into the brand. Maybe that's a little bit of a difference to what you referenced earlier with kind of big CPG, is that we're not saying, oh, this is the demo we want to target, and we're sitting somewhere completely different and trying to imagine what our consumer likes. We know what our consumer likes. We are the consumer. And so we're able to, I think, just, build a little bit more authentically.
So cans in hands. So let's talk about community. How's the community responding to cans in hands? Are they picking up cans in hands? Who is the Hopwtr ideal target consumer for you? And how do you actually stay engaged, connected with them? And how are you building this community you just referred to?
For sure. Yeah. Multiple ways. We like to call our consumer the enlightened overachiever. And, I think that person
Whoa. Hold the presses. Peter, do you know any enlightened overachievers or unenlightened overachievers or enlightened underachievers? I'm just bitter he didn't invite us to the All-Star game.
Shri, you're still on the hands-on cans. As a romantic brand marketer, to me, it was always about the liquid to lips. That's what I'm still focused on.
I think you guys fall into our enlightened overachiever category. We certainly welcome you in.
First time somebody's called us an overachiever, Peter.
Hey, I graduated in the top 75% of my class in college, I'll have you know.
It's never too late.
Did I graduate? I don't know. But community, Jordan.
You're a Hokie, Shri. I don't know if they call it graduation or what, but hey, what happens in Virginia stays in Virginia. We'll leave.
They say Virginia is for lovers, but community, Jordan.
Yeah. So look, I think community, building is very important again for a smaller company. And we use multiple ways. I talked about a little bit of them earlier. I think our direct to consumer business is a way that we're able to talk specifically to and directly to our loyalists. And so that's a nice way to build community, that we're able to directly email those folks, get responses, et cetera, see what they're engaged with. And then we try to be, really involved with our consumers on social. So I'd say up until very recently, I was going in and liking and commenting on every post where someone would tag our product. I was doing the customer service for a long time. Actually, one of our customers just posted on LinkedIn that they found my number randomly and they had an issue and they called me and I picked up and helped them with the issue. And they were talking about how they kind of have become a loyalist from that. And I love those interactions, right? I'm able to not only help someone with a problem, but then understand what do they like about our product, what encourages them to buy it. And we use that in our business to get feedback from our consumers. So that's one way. Another way to build community is talked about is just events. Like we talked about the All-Star game, but we go to a bunch of beer festivals, we go to yoga festivals, et cetera, and just physically interact with our consumers. I think for a young emerging brand, putting a face to the brand, whether it's myself or it's the rest of our team, which are all brand ambassadors, is so important. It just gives kind of real connection with the consumer and with the product. So I'd say social events and real community engagement through our digital platforms.
You're saying we have that many intellectual overachievers?
Oh, yes. We have tens of millions of them.
All right.
I like it. Shri, we aspire to be in that group. All right.
Someday.
I know. Let's take it back up to 30,000 foot level for a second here, Jordan. Where do you see the future of the functional beverage space heading in the next 3 to 5 years? Is this a permanent cultural shift around drinking behavior in moderation, or is this just like a little blip in the history? And I think probably not, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, look, alcohol isn't going away. It's a huge category and it's going to continue to be a large category for a long time. That being said, I think consumers' drinking behaviors are changing even within the alcohol category, right? Hard seltzers weren't a thing a number of years ago. Now it's a meaningful part, RTDs, et cetera.
Can I ask you about that? I saw one that there's a hard seltzer that now has a zero version. Isn't that just seltzer? Why would you pay? I'm sorry. That's like, well, I don't know.
It could be sourced from hard water.
Shri, if you can make a brand out of commodity purified water, the way some companies have, and you can get consumers to buy that, more power to you. But I'm just
30 years in this industry. We know too much about ingredients and commodities.
But Jordan, so at least one of the CPG guys doesn't drink alcohol anymore. The other one falls off the wagon every now and again. We won't mention him by name. It's not me. But I'm assuming that you're targeting people that aren't just me, that do drink alcohol and have value. I'm just do you see this as being something that people who, I guess what I'm saying is, from the behavioral shift, people who still drink alcohol may just want something where they get some of that experience without another experience in between their times drinking. Like, what are your thoughts around this?
Yeah, for sure. I think moderation is a long-term trend, and it's certainly not a fad long-term trend. I don't think anyone's saying it's a fad at this point. Like, we're seeing the leading indicators of what generation now, as you put it, is, saying about their consumption behavior. And what we see is that 75% of our consumers drink alcohol. So there's 25% that don't drink. They're great consumers. We love those consumers. We want to serve them with a great product. The largest portion is consumers that are moderating. So whether they're taking their Tuesday night off, they're taking the week off, they're taking the month or the year off, they're still enjoying an alcoholic beverage. And I think what those consumers used to do is they would turn towards a glass of ice water or a soda that was filled with calories and sugar. And now we're giving them a great alternative so they don't have to miss out. They can still have fun without missing out, basically. And also for the beer aisle where we typically sit, we're not losing that sale to a glass of ice water or a sugary soda. We're bringing that consumer down the beer aisle. We're reinvigorating the non-alc beer set, making it a destination, not a kind of pariah in the corner, and somewhere that consumers actually want to go and seek out a great product. So yeah, I think that we're seeing moderation's a long-term trend. Today non-alc beer is a little less than 2% of the overall beer category. If that grows to 5, 10, 20%, I mean, you're talking about a massive shift and a huge growth opportunity for brands like ours.
How are you staying abreast of these trends? Do you read a lot? Is it LinkedIn? Are you just talking to retail a lot? Is it all of the above? Or you're listening to the CPG guys?
Do you listen to any relevant podcasts by chance?
Of course, the CPG Guys podcast, my number one source for CPG news. Yeah, no, it's all of the above. I mean, I'm constantly reading certainly all of the trade periodicals. They have great data, honestly, and about the industry. I'm of course reading all of the business periodicals and then talking to people. I talk to consumers, talk to retailers, talk to distributors. So yeah, all of the above. And I think as a leader of a company, it's your job to stay informed on all of the trends.
It's time for advice. Are you ready to dish out some advice, Jordan?
Sure.
All right. So startups, lots of fun once they scale. You're in that mode right now where you've scaled. There's a lot of fun going on. You're in retail distribution, which is always fun to manage, but you've reached a stage where you've scaled. The journey could not have been easy, or maybe it is. And we'd love to know, how was that journey? What would you never do again? What is it that if you knew now that you did, you'd replicate in 15 seconds and say, that's the only way I want to do it? AKA, what's the advice you want to give others who are listening in, are budding founders or hope to be founders, especially in the beverage segment?
For sure. Yeah. First of all, to your point, building a brand is very hard. Like you get ready to grind, get ready to, put everything into it. And I think that's not only for me, but that's for our whole team. Like everyone's thinking about this on the weekend, in the evening, like it is full on. So get prepared for that. I like a challenge. So that wasn't a problem for me, but you should just get your head around that. I think from advice standpoint, maybe there's a couple of things on beverage, but I think just CPG more broadly. One, in beverage and really CPG is raise more capital than you think you're going to need. It is definitely a capital intensive business. Consumers, and I don't blame them, are not going to give you any forgiveness for poor quality or poor, marketing or your product not being on shelf because you don't have the budget to do that. Like, they're going to compare a Coca-Cola product to your product, and you need to be up on the game. So raise more capital than you think you're going to need. Two, I think is for me personally, one of the things that I learned was not to get too caught up in paralysis analysis. Like, do the analysis, look at everything, but then just make the decision and go. And I will give my co-founder a lot of credit here. He was very helpful. He'd been through the journey before, and it was nice to have someone with complementary skills where we get to the point where we've done all the analysis. Then it was just like, okay, what's the decision? Let's go. Let's just take the risk. Let's move forward. I think that as a budding entrepreneur or looking at a concept, you try to think of all of the eventualities. Okay, well, what is a consumer going to think here? Or what could happen here? could this not work because of X, Y, and Z? And the reality is you just can't see all of those until you get going. You'll see so much more and you'll see the solutions as you get going. So I think just get going.
On the capital side, it's actually great advice, but one of the things that holds people back from capital are two different paths here. One is they don't have the credibility to raise a lot of capital, but the other one and more important one is they don't want to give away equity. So how did you manage the second one?
For sure. Look, I think like you can, I mean, this is classic sort of startup advice, right? You can own a smaller piece of a big thing, or you can own a big piece of a small thing. And you just really have to, I think, make that personal decision on what you're looking for. If you want a fast growing startup, I don't know of many fast growing startups out there that haven't raised capital and brought in investors. So I think you just have to get your head around that. And frankly, investors can add a lot of value. You know, we brought in investors that have helped us strategically, both with introductions, connections, advice. So, you know, it's not just capital. You can also get like a real benefit from having smart people around the table that have done this before.
I'm intrigued by the fact that you gave your co-founder credit for coming up with some really great ideas. I may have to try that sometime. I'm not, it's a little unfamiliar to me. I just don't want to feed his ego, but
You'll stay a boomer Luddite for a long time, Peter.
I probably will, Shri. All right. So, Jordan, let me close this out. With looking to the future, what's next for Hopwtr? Is it about new flavors? Is it about new formats? Is it about international expansion? Is it about all three? Like, what's on your roadmap for growth that you'd love to share with our audience?
For sure. I think it's going deeper with what's working. You know, we're still in teens percentage ACV. Like there's still so much to do in terms of retail distribution in the US, both within our existing channels, but in new channels also. So we've started expanding into the C-store channel, which is a new area for us. I think that's a huge long-term growth opportunity over multiple years. We have a really exciting retail launch in the next couple of months, a big retailer nationally that we'll be launching with in October.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So one we've been working on.
Let us know how the CPG guys can amplify that for you when you get there.
Cool. I will. Yeah, it's one we've been working on for a long time. So I appreciate that. And I certainly will. And then we have a couple new product launches. We just launched our iced tea and lemonade, which is doing really well. It went nationwide with Sprouts. It's going into a couple other retailers now. So that's getting really good traction. And then we have a limited edition offering, an LTO that we're launching, I think, in October, our spiced apple. So a seasonal product that we'll be launching. So that should be a fun launch.
How awesome. As we actually wrap up here, Peter, you know, one big takeaway for me, there's one sentence that has stood out in my head. You know, I asked Jordan, what's the best advice you can give others who want to be an entrepreneur? And I think the biggest takeaway from this episode, while Jordan said a lot about just running the business, starting it up, flavor profiles, ACV concerns, ACV development, new ideas, new growth. The one message that stands out, make sure you raise the right capital as a founder. Thoughts, Peter?
Yeah, I agree, Shri. I'm still stuck on the liquid to lips. I think that
cans and hands, baby.
That's going to be the hashtag that goes on. Cans and hands, liquid to lips. I think that'll be the hashtag on the T-shirt we immortalize Jordan with. But no, to me, it's very much about that. How do I deal with the complexities of physical retail and the fact that it takes a lot longer? And at the end of the day, for all the glorious marketing, the design of the can, the flavor of the product, like if you don't have it visibly present for consumers at retail, none of that matters. You got to get it in their face. If it's not in their face, they're not going to pick it up.
For sure.
What a terrific conversation. Let me thank audience for listening to this episode. Do leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or a favorite listening platform, because it informs us how we're doing, as well as if we're having the right conversations with the right guests. To all of you, thank you from Peter and me. To all our sponsors, whether of this podcast, our parties, events, hosted dinners, having us at panels. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Without you, the show doesn't exist. You make the show happen. Jordan, it was a pleasure talking to a fast-scaling functional beverage founder. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Peter, always fun doing this with you week over week. Thank you for joining me as always, Peter.
I love it, Shri. This was another great episode. I'm looking forward to being an actual consumer of Hopwtr. This is, and you know what? He said they sell it at Wegmans. Guess what just opened in Connecticut, Shri? You know this. Our first Wegmans store. It's now my weekly shopping destination. Can't wait to give it a try.
Love it.
Cans in hands, baby. That's what's going to happen with Peter this weekend. And that's a wrap of this episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.